So let's get started. So we looks like we kind of plateaued a little bit here. So I think most of you folks are in. Welcome everyone. My name is Nick Pringer, joined by Andy Schrader. Housekeeping stuff. If you haven't been to a webinar before, yes, we record this. Yes, we send you the slides and everything to you. If you ever can't make a webinar live, but you sign up anyway, same thing. We'll send you the slides. We'll send you the recording. If we mention something like a resource or a download or something free that we put together, we'll always send links to that as well. That'll probably be to you by tomorrow morning, I'm guessing. We got to let the video, give the video time to cook. Let Rob and Mitch and the crew edit out all of our references to Christmas and try and make it a little bit more timeless. So I think that's all. Oh, except for if you have questions, use the Q&A button. I always, you know what, Andy, how many times do I say that? And it never works anyway, right? Like 3 years in, I'm like, hey, hit the Q&A button, and then it keeps it nice and orderly. It doesn't matter. You're going to use the chat anyway, so keep using the chat. All right, newsletter. I have this up here just if you want. I'm sure we can put the link in the chat as well. I have that up because if you're new to PSG webinars, we do a ton of really useful stuff around Razor's Edge, around fundraising, about automation, around anything digital fundraising. We just, as of 3 days ago, finalized our webinar list for the next 11 months, and we have some bangers coming out. You're going to love them. Newsletter is where you get those links to sign up for the webinar. So as of the one we do next month in January, we'll probably even announce all the stuff we're doing. But newsletter link is there. I promise you, we don't spam you. Really, it's just a list of any research projects we've done, any upcoming webinars, any of the fun giveaways that we have. Okay. Who we are? Andy is, Stacy, Lauren, Rob, the biggest data nerds that you've ever met in your entire life, whether you met us virtually or live at BBCon. That is what we do. We live and breathe data, fundraising, analytics, technology, automation. When we're not doing that, we like to go on horse-drawn carriage rides through the mountains. That is something we really like to do this time of year. That's our whole team, minus Angie. Angie was out that day, but I thought that was a fun picture to join for today. Our company is called Pringer Solutions Group. We do a couple main things. We run fundraising appeals for giant clients. We raise hundreds of millions of dollars a year for our clients, so we really know a lot about fundraising. We manage their annual appeals. We do Razor's Edge database administration. A lot of large organizations have outsourced their administration to us. So many, in fact, that we are the largest user of Razor's Edge in the world. We manage millions of constituents for clients all across the United States. I think just the United States. Do we have anybody in Canada yet, Andy?
Not yet.
Not yet. Not until a boot an hour from now when somebody reaches out and says, hey, we want to outsource to you. We are really, really, really into automation. This photo here is from Stacy and Austin, who are Blackbaud famous from the session they did the last BBCon, which was all about fundraising automation. We have started in the last year building automations for clients, fundraising automations for all the folks you see on the screen there. And it got so big that we actually offer it as an entire division now. So if you are looking to automate some really cool stuff, we're not going to talk a bunch about it today, but just that might be how you heard about us, is through Automate Genius. That's who we are and what we do. Plenty of probably throat clearing here. Let's give the people what they want, Andy. Let's talk about benchmarking, huh?
I'm ready.
What do you think?
I'm ready.
So let's divide it like this. Andy's going to go first, and you're going to talk about inside of Razor's Edge. You can screen share and talk about the benchmarking stuff that exists in Razor's Edge that people may not know about. And then let's talk about any KPIs, because it is kind of the same. Like there's benchmarking, and there's also like key performance indicators. How do I measure whether our fundraising is working? You do that part, and then I'll steal it back, and I'm going to go through like the 6 or 7 things we get asked all the time about, right? When somebody calls and says, hey, I have a benchmarking question, or I have a question, I know what it's going to be. It's going to be one of these 7 questions. So I'm going to walk through all of those, and then we'll do a ton of Q&A.
Sounds good.
All right, I'll stop sharing. I'll let you go live on the screen. And as a reminder, as we go through this, as you have questions, hit that Q&A button, because we'll probably, if it's something related to what's on the screen, we'll probably answer it live. Otherwise, we'll just tackle it towards the end.
Right on. And I guess full disclosure. So we're going to be showing you a live Razor's Edge database today. It is the Pringer Solutions Sandbox database. So as names and stuff pop up, no need to freak out. We've created a whole bunch of characters inside of our database. It's our our nerd laboratory. We get to test a lot of automations in this, and run a lot of random reports and build a lot of stuff before we actually deploy it in live production for clients. So just kind of wanted to share some of that. We've done webinars before where people are like, what's going on here? Are these real people? Why are you sharing this? Should I call my lawyer? Whatever. So we're excited. Excited to do this. My hope is that, one, you get a lot out of this, and for me, if it goes super well, that maybe I too can have my own bobblehead. So with with that, let's get started and have some fun. So I'm going to be sharing things primarily in NXT today, and just kind of showing you the things that we look at. So probably when clients talk to us a lot about what should we be looking at, kind of how do we know if we're good, if we're not so good, the first thing where my head goes, and a lot of the people on our team go, is what is your data hygiene looking like, right? So the easiest place to check that out, is if you go to tools into data health, right? And so for those of you using database view, there is still kind of the data health scorecard, but this is certainly a much easier way to kind of take a look at this. And so just, kind of overview: address health, great; deceased health, great; email health, below average. Because we created a lot of people, we didn't create a lot of emails for these people, which is why ours is low. We're going to get into a little bit later. I think, Nick, you might have some information on what's an acceptable rate, so we'll get into that. And then again, kind of looking at phone health, we're below average. It's important, so you're just kind of like, okay, what constitutes great, what constitutes below average? You can actually click on these, and it will kind of share with you, a lot of that data. So much so, from an address health standpoint, it actually can quantify the amount of money that you're saving or potentially losing by having bad addresses and those kinds of things in your system. So just kind of pointing some of these things out from a data health standpoint. There's obviously going to be opportunities to clean a lot of these things up, but if you're kind of wondering, these are standards that Blackbaud has set. So you're being graded against other people who have Razor's Edge databases, and what percentage of their databases have addresses, what percentage of their databases have, active clean records, and those kinds of things. So that is the kind of the first thing I wanted to share: data health scorecard. Take a look at it if you haven't, and that's just something to keep in mind as things get slow, maybe after the holidays. I'll give you an opportunity to go in there. This does run annually, so there will be an opportunity to kind of see how you're stacking up, after you've done some of those cleanups and those sorts of things.
Andy, do we know what's the cadence? So it does it annually. Does it just happen on its own? Is there something that users have to do to?
Nope, there's nothing that users have to do. So generally it runs like when it runs different for everybody. So it's not like, hey, it's February 1st and everybody's, or like ours is, going to probably run again on around the 11th of February in 2025. It's generally based on when you spun up your NXT instance, right? And so then it will just, like, shortly after you go live, it's just going to run it, and then it will run it on an annual cadence after that for the data health scorecard, right? So the information will update sooner, but just in terms of like where you are in relation to everybody else and going from like good to great, or average, below average, those kinds of things, don't expect them to change after you go in and clean up 100 or 200 records right away. The numbers will look different, but the words will more or less stay the same. Cool. All right, so the thing I think I'm probably most excited to talk about, because a lot of people don't know it exists, and if you do, like, kudos to you. Like, you should be running these webinars. But I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the standard reports, but specifically this benchmarking report, and this is kind of what inspired some of this topic today. A lot of people will reach out to us and say, hey, like, I know how I'm doing, but like, we work with a lot of clients and they want to know how they're doing compared to how other clients are doing, right? And so
Other clients mean like museums want to know how other arts and
how
culture.
other museums are doing, right? Or if you're a diocese, which we work with some dioceses, how are other dioceses doing? Are they up? Are they down? Are they up in donors? Are they up in dollars? What's their retention looking like? Are they getting new people? Those kinds of things, right? And so this benchmarking thing exists, and again, a lot of people don't know it exists, right? So I'm going to fundraising and reporting, and then within that, you may have some of these things. So if you don't see the benchmarking tab up there, if you hit this little plus icon, it's in a drop-down menu. You can click it, and it's going to launch. But what I want to share. So I have not created any filters other than the calendar year of 2024. So I can go and if I want to if I'm a health organization, for instance, I can click on health and I can see how health organizations are doing, right? And how health organizations are doing compared to other health organizations. When I say compared to other health organizations, what I mean by that is other health organizations that are using Blackbaud Razor's Edge, because Razor's like Blackbaud is essentially taking all of the environments that they have that are in the health vertical, right, or in the arts vertical or the higher ed vertical or whatever, and looking at your data, your singular data in your environment compared to everybody else, right? And so where you are here, right, kind of compared to where the average is, where the good and the great numbers are for everybody else in health, right? And what those numbers potentially look like. If I switch, right, to a different, like say K-12, right, the numbers, the good, like if you see on there, the average, good, and great numbers shifted, right? So it is, kind of interactive when you look at it by vertical. So if you are a K-12 organization on here right now and you know where you're at and you want to see kind of where everybody else is, these are opportunities for you to kind of say, okay, we're ahead of the curve, things are going well, or hey, we're behind, and what do we need to do to get better, right? So go ahead, Nick.
Yeah. So as predicted, the response, I'm looking through Q&A here, like we've got people in two camps. We've got the holy cow, I didn't know this was there. This is awesome. Like this is really fun. I can't wait to go check it out. And then we have folks who are like, I've dug so deep into this, I don't have confidence in Blackbaud's numbers. Like they're not updated, like things don't make sense. So and any reaction to the folks on maybe the more seasoned end, which are like, are these real numbers from Blackbaud? Are they making them up? Like again, they're not our numbers. Our job,
Yep.
we're a large user of Blackbaud. We are not Blackbaud. Thoughts on that?
Uh, yes. So I mean, I do feel that there's some degree of certainty within this, right? If they have access to everybody's database, which we believe they do because they are who we're getting this information from, right? How the data is pulled, and I would say, we know within the organizations that are on here, and there are a lot of you on here today, right? How each of you record that individual data is different, right? So it's putting maybe what they assume you're doing in a specific kind of shape format, and it may not be apples to apples. It may be apples to oranges, or a very different variety of apples even. So it may not be perfect, but again, it gives you at least some sense.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think I would describe it as a blunt instrument, right? So there's folks that have asked a question, truly. So it's in some way you could look at it like well screening, right? Like it's
Mhm.
helpful to know, like think of well screening. It's helpful to know, just get all of your prospects down to one number based on estimated wealth. As you dig into those individuals, you're going to find things that are wrong, right? But from a
Mhm.
broad strokes, it's going to be helpful to know, again, open rates and deceased records, and of course, there's going to be nuances in there. So again, I'm trying to thread the needle here of being helpful to folks and explain where stuff is in Blackbaud without taking ownership of any good or terrible decisions that Blackbaud is making as far as like what's driving those numbers here.
Yep. I do want to show within this a couple things. So again, when we're looking at the benchmarking, here, I'm just going to switch this back to all. And again, you can look at all organizations. You can break it down by fundraising revenue. So how do you compare to similar size organizations? Again, they're still pretty large ranges, but it gives you some sense. And again, kind of year over year, if you want to look at your own year over year versus others, those kinds of things, you can do that. But so we're looking at, again, acquisition, retention, recapture, giving rate, recent donors, current donors. One of the things that is helpful too that I have found in using a tool like this, when we're looking at, hey, like potential lapse donors, at-risk donors, those kinds of things, live bunts, side bunts, we're running a lot of reports to do those kinds of things. In this area, with a simple click, I can look at a list of at-risk donors, and Blackbaud defines at-risk donors as people who've given between 12 and 18 months ago. So, I mean, it's not, some of us consider lapse as, 12 months and they're lapsed. So the at-risk is people that have given within the last 12 to 18 months, but have not given, maybe this year or whatever, right? With a simple click, it's going to launch for me in NXT list all of those people. So I don't need to run a bunch of queries and exports and those kinds of things. If I know some of these things I'm looking for, it's telling me what their last gift was, how much it was, what they gave to, those kinds of things. I can export this list and do with it what I want, or, divvy it up amongst the staff to kind of follow up. Those sorts of at-risk lists is money. I mean, so there's lots of opportunities here, and honestly, like time-saving measures in some of these things where you can quickly access a lot of this information.
Yeah. On that question, so Carol had a question. So logging in, she's under reporting, doesn't see benchmarking. Is this something that you have to turn on? Is it an extra payment? Not to put you on the
It isn't.
spot.
It should be on there, and I can try and show you, like I said, if you hit that little plus icon, it will, because the benchmarking is a canned report similar to overview and some of these others. So Carol, if you're looking, if you have this
There
little
you go.
plus icon up here,
Yep.
you'll be able to see all of the reports that are available, and this is where you should see it. If not, shoot me an email message and we can
I
talk
bet
about
that's what it is. I bet it wasn't tabbed.
that.
Also, have I ever told you how terrified I am when we do like live Razor's Edge stuff? Like, I swear it's like 4 for 4. Like, we do this and it's like then web view is down like the moment we go live on a webinar. But so far, I'm very proud. It's like we're hanging in there.
Which means it's going to melt in about 30 seconds.
I
So
know. I just
cool, boss, cool.
hustle through.
So a couple other things again, and just kind of looking at some of these canned reports. Again, they're things that you don't require a lot of thinking, right? So if we're looking at acquisition, and a lot of us organizations will spend money on trying to get new donors, or hey, how many new donors did we get this year? How much did they give? Those kinds of things, right? So in this situation, in our database, right, we've acquired 74 new donors, this calendar year. It's telling us that. I literally clicked one button. You just saw me do it. I didn't have to run a ton of reports. It's serving it up right there for us. It's letting me know, this is the amount of money that they raise. I think it's because there's a giant $3 million gift in there that was from my wife and I. You're
Generous.
welcome. But and again, kind of looking at year over year, how are we, percentage of the database. This is another thing as you get into some of these reports, when you say to yourself, like, what in the heck am I looking at right now? These little I buttons, these information buttons are kind of cool. It'll actually give you the terminology and kind of the guts of what these little reports are, right? So if you're kind of like, what does year over year donor acquisition actually mean? What are they measuring it, right? So you can go year over year donor acquisition, and it will tell you what they're doing, how they're getting that information, so that when you're preparing this for your boss and then you get asked the first question, you're like, we can kind of avoid some of those sorts of things, right? So the acquisition one is nice. The one that really gets my heart pumping as a major kind of plan gift officer, and I have the opportunity to work with a lot of our clients on, setting up kind of best practices in major giving and plan giving and those kinds of things, is this opportunity page. And so if you are a person kind of managing or running a fundraising team, and you want to know kind of what you have out there in terms of ask and opportunities and what's being funded and what's not being funded, without creating a whole bunch of like crazy dashboards and reports and things, this is the way to do it, right? So this opportunities tab, and you can sort and filter based on opportunity type, deadlines, all kinds of stuff, right? But right now we have 51 opportunities. We've asked for 44 million. We're expecting, based on the feedback that the gift officers have given or that the donors have given, 39 million. And so far we've actually received 9.2 million of that. It breaks it down, opportunities by type. So where are they at in the kind of the moves management cycle? Are they in cultivation, solicitation? Are we past that? Those kinds of things. We often get asked, and Nick, we've talked about this, right? Like, how do people record plan gifts, right?
Right.
Because they don't have the money until the person passes away, but they want to be able to report out to boards or leadership or whatever. Hey, we've got some commitments out there for estate gifts. Do we put them in Razor's Edge? Do we not put them in Razor's Edge? Oftentimes our development, nerds, the database people have said, hey, creating it as an opportunity is a way to like get it in the system, to kind of tag it and flag it in a way where there's some accountability there, but it's not messing up a whole bunch of your numbers and reporting and those kinds of things. So, kind of looking at that there. And then again, it's sorting out for you some of these things here again, in terms of conversion rates. How long is it taking you to get that person from, the ask to an actual commitment, and then from the commitment to actually getting paid on that commitment? So from the time that they said, yes, this is what I'm expecting to give you, to the point where it's actually funded, what does that like life cycle look like? Because it then allows you to plan and budget for, this is how long it's going to take to raise this kind of money, and this is how many people we have to ask to get these kinds of money. So if you're thinking about building a gift pyramid in the capital campaign days, those kinds of things, this is an area where you can do some of those things. So
I I would just point out on that top. So if you have asked for 44 million and you're expecting 39 million, you are running the world's greatest fundraising operation. Uh, or as a DBA, you should be saying, there's some fuzz on these numbers. We got some guys that are pretty optimistic, or they're not asking for enough. But that's what I love about this, right? Like it's the Blackbaud is getting to the point in WebView and building out these reports and building out the benchmarking as more and more people move to WebView and we've had whole webinars on that. This will become increasingly useful, right? It just will, because it can be live data. Your job is going to be better to be able to give accurate projections to your boss, to your board, whoever it might be. So this is important, right? And I can tell there's a lot of people that are just learning about this because of the number of people I'm seeing in the chat and in the Q&A who are like, how do I find this? Where do I find this? Oh, and somebody just like, thank you. I think Danelle and Melanie shared that they found it on the little triangle and not the plus button. So like, I love the fact that there's a whole bunch of people that are just discovering this for the first time, because you're going to find stuff that makes your life easier.
So I'm going to do, I know we've got a lot to get to, so I want to just talk about a couple more things, right? So another thing that a lot of people ask about are dashboards, right? So there are dashboards that are kind of native where you can create dashboards. You look at, again, gifts received, gifts committed, who gave them, some of those things. We can look at average gift size, that kind of stuff. Again, to keep an eye on a particular appeal. If I'm a fundraiser and I want to create a dashboard and just kind of keep an eye on my people that have given what they gave last year, what they've given this year. It's just an opportunity, again, to kind of keep the pulse on some things. Again, in a basic dashboard, right? It's not going to be all the bells and whistles. To get all the bells and whistles, you have to purchase an add-on from Blackbaud Insight Designer, which allows you to look at things like projected recurring revenue. So if the people actually make those recurring gifts, on that schedule for the rest of the year, how much additional money can we expect from that? Pledge payments, are we looking at in-kind things, stock, donor advice fund gifts versus, kind of a traditional gift, like lots of different things that you can look at there. But again, just building some basic dashboard, getting around, getting in there and just kind of messing around with it, setting up some simple stuff. Like, it's very hard to break anything in creating these things. It might not be exactly what you're looking for first time, but there's lots of opportunities to measure the success that you're having, or maybe the lack of success that you're having, but allow you to kind of build strategies, if you know the numbers, around how are we going to get to that better place, and those sorts of things. So one last thing, and then I'm going to shut up here, Nick, and turn it back over to you. So this is just, again, I'm just going to show an overview report here, right? So I'm just looking at, for the year, what I raised from January 1st to January 1st to 2025. And keep in mind, this hasn't happened yet. There's a reason why I put this in here. I've worked for various organizations, and what I do at the beginning of, so in January, I'm going to set this overview report up. And I'm going to put January 1st, 2025 to January 1st, 2026. I'm going to put it in there if I want to look at the annual appeal, if I want to look at a specific fund or a specific campaign. Once I set that up, and I'm looking at committed revenue versus received revenue, however I want to do that, I'm going to go up to this little clock guy up here, and I want to say, email me the overview report. I want to get it weekly, every Monday at 1:30, right? So every Monday at 1:30, this dashboard will be sent weekly at 1:30 to database at Pringer Solutions as a PDF attachment, and will include all current activity. Okay. I'm going to hit schedule, and then I'm not going to have inbox 0, surprise, surprise, but it's going to allow me now. So I'm going to start seeing this every Monday. I'm going to see this report, and every Monday, if new gifts are being entered, those numbers are going to change every Monday, right? So I just now, without any further work, every Monday at 1:30, I'm going to get kind of a pulse in a PDF form quickly of how we doing. Are the numbers up? Did we get a big gift? It's looking kind of comparatively at, year over year. So I'm, without a super detailed thing, it's allowing me to do that. I can add more people to that. So if I want it to just be me, great. If I want it to be Nick and Rob as well, I can add those people to also receive that email. And if they get it and they're like, this is weird, I want to unsubscribe, they can unsubscribe and stop getting that. But the reason why I put in that date range is so that it will allow me to get those in an updated format each and every time it runs.
And I strongly encourage everybody to set one up. And the reason why is because that report is a gateway drug into automation. It is the way that you will start getting those, and you're like, this is crazy useful every Monday. This is awesome. And you're instantly then going to say, boy, what would be really useful is if it was in this format. Or, oh my gosh, what if like when I pull this list, you could click on something and automatically draft an email to that donor. Or what if I could create a distribution that if this happens, we send it to my boss, and if this happens, we're going to send it to the board. Like that is where automation comes into play, and we talk a bunch about that. So basically, look at it as Blackbaud, Razor's Edge is doing a good job of moving things to WebView. It's all still pretty basic, right? It's they can't solve everything, but they're going to solve some basic canned reports. They're starting the ability for you to distribute some reports. As soon as you get in the habit of that, it's going to blow your mind what you can do with a little bit of automation to make it really bespoke to what you need.
Yep. And I think a couple of people had asked, just because I went through that kind of quick. So any of these tabs up here will allow you to do that. So even if we went back to the opportunities tab that I was looking at, this little clock guy up here in the top right is where you can click, and that's what's going to allow you to email those dashboard reports, to yourself, to others. If you add recipients, it will allow you to add additional people, and you can choose how frequently you want to get it, and are able to do that. So yes, and we'll send you, again, if you're getting the recording, you can play that back, and maybe we can mark that, Rob, as a highlight of, within the webinar, where to kind of look at that sort of thing.
I feel like a lot of people just came to see that part right there. They're like, oh my gosh. All right. So like tuned out. They're all in their view right now, loading those things up. Love it.
All right.
And that's
stop sharing.
Okay. I'll go back to the popular benchmarking stuff. So that's been helpful to us, even so PSG, we run a whole bunch of clients, right? So it's been helpful for me to get those set up so that I know how clients are doing, right? Every week I could go and look down and see how the appeals are doing and what we look like. It's a dream scenario. It's the right amount of information. If I want to know more, I can dig in. Okay.
It is addicting.
Yeah. It's just going to start you down the path of what is possible, which it's a pretty exciting time to be working in fundraising. Okay, let me share. All right. So Andy just shared, and again, we are database agnostic, but most of our clients use Razor's Edge. We use it a ton, so that's why we always kind of focus in there. We know most of the people in our webinar audience. Some you might be using Salesforce or Virtuous or Bloomerang or something else. There's probably similar functionality there. We're just not the world's experts on it, so we're going to kind of leave you to your own devices on that. However, when it comes to just benchmarking questions, this is stuff that does apply regardless of what database you use. So I'm going to go through the ones that we get asked. Let's think of this lightning round. Things we get asked the most from our clients and from others. What percentage of our donors should have emails on file? Okay. So in the year 2025, the answer is 75%. Yeah. So look at your donors. I'm not saying everyone in your database, but this can be your benchmark, right? If people have given within the last year to my organization, if you want to be on par with where your peers are, you should have about 75 out of 100 with an email on file. If you do not, there are things that you can do. I would start with your pledge card design. Are you asking for an email, and are you recording that email when those gifts come in, either you or your lockbox, right? And Rob's probably going to blow up the chat here because we've done webinars on all of these topics individually. If you want to know more about the world's greatest pledge card design, if you want to know about donation forms, improving gift entry process, right? You would be shocked how many clients we've worked with that have been asking for emails for years and they just don't go anywhere, right? They're sitting on a card somewhere over on the side because they never trained the temp or they never demanded that the lockbox, type in the email address, and that donor just keeps writing it year after year after year. I find myself getting frustrated when I make a gift somewhere, or even when I fill out, like I got an eye appointment yesterday, and it asked me for my email, and I wrote it down knowing full well it was going nowhere, and I'm so annoyed. It's a tiny little form, and I got to write a long email, but I know it's not going anywhere. It's never been used. They've never emailed me ever. If you ask for emails, you should be doing something with it. So 75% is the good benchmark. You will never get to 100%. Some people don't like to share their emails. Some people don't have emails. Older folks, although I don't even like saying that. Everybody says, "Oh, our donors are older. They don't use email." That's malarkey, right? If they're over
90, he has an email. Believe me, old people use email.
And if you're over 90, that's great. Okay, I get it. But when we talk, so many times I hear from finance committees and group, oh, our people are older, and they're talking like they're in their 60s, right? People in their 60s have, like that line in the sand at which people don't use the internet and email is not 60, right? It's 90, 95. We know this because this is all that we do, right? I have data points.
I would say too, Nick, as you're switching, if
Yeah.
you're running an event and if you're not asking for an email at your event, maybe you should look for a different job. Like that is low hanging fruit.
Oh, yes. I like Melanie's comment. Older people use email, younger people don't. I get the point you're making, but also younger people do use email. Like it's
they're required to at work.
Yes, they're required to do work, and that's how you get receipts. That's how you get. I have to register for events and all that stuff. Yes. Oh my goodness, we should probably do a webinar just on that, on event registration, like best practices. Okay, move away from paper forms. Move towards making life easier. Make sure you're doing something with those emails. A lot of times, you may want to set up an automation that takes that email address and brings it into the right spot. If you're using multiple vendors, we can talk about that. All right, this may be the most controversial thing we've ever done.
We're gonna light the chat on fire here in a second.
I can't wait. I'm going to release this into the world. We're going to make this a social media post. I'm going to put it out there. How many gifts can one person process in a day? We get asked this by two different groups of people. CFOs, right? High level C-suite leaders who are like, I really feel like we have too many gift entry people or something like that, or we're not like what, but they have no idea what we should be processing. Like, what should we expect from somebody? Or they're looking to hire somebody new and they're like, how many people do we need? Whatever. Or we have people who are entering gifts who are like, I think I'm crushing it. Am I? Like, how do I compare against others there? Okay, here we go. How many gifts can one person process in a day? This is PSG. We are the largest user of Blackout in the world. We process, I think the technical term is a ton of gifts, right? This is what can be done inside of Razor's Edge. The number of gifts you can process per hour is the top line. How many you can do if you do it in a day? Know that I don't say 8 hours in a working day. Yes, there's going to be other things you have to do, restroom and go to lunch and everything else. But just for benchmarking purposes, do you want to walk through this, Andy? Anything that jumps out or that you think is going to be controversial?
Right. I mean, you know, we talked about this affectionately. We have the black button ninjas, right? So the people who are in it, who process a lot of online gifts, who see those pledge response cards, the individual clients that we work with, where we kind of manage their expectations and monitor how many gifts they're processing in a day, week, month, whatever. Manual gifts, that's assuming that, you know, either some of those are going to be brand new gifts and some of those are going to be people in your system, but, you know, they're just a check coming in and maybe they have a, you know, note or something like that with that, but it's nothing is essentially pre-populated, right? It takes a little bit longer to match up and mark up and make sure that, you know, kind of affirm that they are the person that they are. The response cards, you know, generally are pre-populated. You're going to get the constituent IDs. You can match up the address. You know who that person is, and they're in your system already, right? If you have a pre-populated ID, this is not a new donor, so it's, you know, a lot easier to kind of collect those, batch them up, sort them by gift type, and rock and roll. We felt it was important on the online gift piece to kind of differentiate the difference between OLX and NXT, because NXT does a lot of that, you know, batching and those kinds of things for you, whereas OLX, you have to do a lot more kind of constituent linking and verification, and it is maybe a little bit slower of a process, as opposed to just like an NXT hitting approve. So we did differentiate a little bit there, but yeah, we're feeling pretty confident in those numbers that we
And
put out there, and that, like I said, that we ourselves have done. We have a lot of people on the team that before coming to PSG, we're processing gifts. We work with a lot of teams that process gifts, and these are reasonable things to ask. If you're doing more than this, you know, jokingly we said like you may want to ask for a raise. If you're doing less than this, hope that your boss is not on the call with you as well.
But there's, let's talk more about that too. Okay, so a couple questions came up. This is one person. This is not a team. This is one person. So if you have 3 people entering gifts, if you have one person, this is what you should look at to be like, hey, not only are our people processing at a normal rate, but also are our processes overly burdensome? Are they crazy? Because believe me, we've seen that as well too. So we've gone in. I'm thinking of a client we went into a year or two ago that had a massive team, right? Like processing a massive amount of gifts. And we actually clocked this, right? Like we set up the experiment, we ran it for 3 days, everybody focused and working hard. Like I know these numbers are good. And if anything, they're conservative because we don't want to agitate people too much. But these are good numbers for one person to be able to process. So if you're below this, it could be you got to there's ways you can speed up, and I'm sure we've got webinars, or we can do webinars on, you know, make sure that you're doing it in an optimal way. But there's also plenty of organizations that to process a gift, they require crazy steps, right? Andy, you know what I'm talking about here. Like,
yeah, that's why development offices hate finance offices.
Finance and development, they bump heads, and it's usually not until they bring in somebody like PSG to be like, look, you do not need to reconcile every single day or twice a day. Like you don't need to fill out a paper pledge, you know, remit form in addition to the batch you just put into Razor's Edge, and then also go back and check them over here. Like, there's any number of things that could lead to your numbers being lower than this. But if they are lower than this, something is amiss, right? It's either your training or the person putting it in or the processes themselves or any number of things. Okay.
Yeah, there are a few things that came out of this, Nick. I just want to kind of address. So,
Please.
I think Jeremy, you had on there. This, from our standpoint, this assumes the gift entry piece of it. It does not include kind of the acknowledgement piece
Whole
of it.
different animal.
It's just getting the gifts in there. And then we also had, does this include applying gifts to pledges, those kinds of things? Again, we're looking at an average. So we know in a given day, you're going to have pledge gifts, you're going to have tribute, honor, memorial gifts, and you're going to have just, standard white mail gifts. So it's really a combination of all gifts, types, sizes, across the board that would fit the mold here.
Yep. Yep. It happens. And you have to go up to the printer. I mean, there's all sorts of things that wiggle room. The question from Shaylin is great. How do we measure, what's a good way to measure it? With a clock. I mean, there's nothing more than that. Like, there's nothing more sophisticated. There's no app I'm going to sell you. Set out, if you have enough gifts, set out an hour and find out how many did I get through, right? And then do it again. And after 2 or 3 times, you're going to have a good sense of where you're at on this. And if you don't have an hour, find out how many gifts you have, find out how long, track how long it takes you to do them, and then you can do the math from there.
Well, and another important thing here, and part of why we come up with, our numbers and those kinds of things, organizations, there are some organizations that we work with that have very heavy gift cycles, right? Where they need to bring in temps to process gifts after they launch a huge appeal or, year-end giving and those kinds of things. And so they will often ask us, like, how many people do we need to bring in and hire based on what we think our anticipated gift volume is going to be? And having these, kind of out there as a benchmark allows us to be able to say, you're probably going to need 3 people because this is what they're going to be able to do. And once you train them up, do those kinds of things. Or if you're kind of redeploying staff from other areas of, the organization to help with gift entry at certain times of the year, again, based on peak times and those kinds of things, you got to kind of get a sense of, are you efficient or are you not efficient? We feel that this is an efficient operation if you're hitting these numbers.
And the truth is, I mean, and if you're above this and if you're crushing it, talk to us, man. We do a lot. We do a lot of work for a lot of organizations on Razor's Edge. We'd love to hear from you. If you're a super gift processor and you want to do some more work, let us know. We've got more than we can handle. So these are good numbers. Of course, there's some fuzz on them depending on your process and everything else that Andy said. But I will stand by these all day long, right? Like, if somebody asks me, we need to hire somebody, we have this many gifts, how many people do we need? This is what I'm going to look at that, right? And if things are way off, you bring in a company like PSG to come in and take a look, and we can be the bad guys telling your finance office, hey, these 17 forms you have them filling out are not necessary, right? We've done it. We've done it before. We speak that language. We're always happy to do that. Okay. How many? Yeah, another good point. I think Melanie just brought it too. So, like, so that it's not like a measuring you, are you performing? It's also a great way to have your back, right? If you have a huge volume and you're the only gift processor and your boss keeps saying, well, we got to do more, this is what you can show them and be like, look, I'm killing it. I'm way above average here. Okay. How many prospects should one fundraiser have in a portfolio? I don't think we need to kill a ton of time on this. Andy, what's your answer?
No. Well, how did Mitch get on there? So
Oh, handsome.
Young Mitch, 100 to 150. I mean, I think, again, having had my own portfolio, some organizations will say everybody should have 250. I mean, the heart and soul of it is you cannot be an effective relationship manager if you're, expected to have meaningful contacts and relationships with 10 to 12 people a day, each and every day. It's just not realistic, right? So this will shift a little bit from organization to organization, but I would say for the most part, 100 to 150 assigned prospects, major gift prospects or lead annual gifts is what we're looking at here.
And that number can increase as you embrace automation. I'm just telling you. I'm thinking of what we're doing for clients on the Automate Genius side, where you can draft, like when somebody makes a gift, you're auto drafting an email direct from our man Mitch here with his feet on the desk. There's incredible things that you can do to leverage automation to make that major gift officer more effective. It is going to lead to larger portfolios, but for now, 100 to 150. How many of your gifts should be recurring, right? So you get 1,000 gifts in a year. How many of those should be recurring? I'll start with this stat, right? I forget who did this. If it was Institute of Philanthropy, I'll look up the credit and I'll make sure we put it in the notes. They asked donors, a study done. They asked donors, how many of you are enrolled in a monthly giving program, a recurring giving program? 57% of donors, as of last year, said that they were already giving somewhere monthly. That is incredibly important for every single one of the hundreds of people that signed up for this. It's important that you hear that. Look at your donor pool and realize that almost 60% of them are already giving a recurring gift somewhere.
Just somewhere.
And if it's not you, you need to get in there, right? Like that is so many times the barrier to a great recurring giving program is not the donor, it is the nonprofit that's like, we can't ask for a monthly gift. We don't want to do that. It's a burden. You know, you talk yourself into all this stuff. The world is passing you by. The entire economy has moved to monthly giving, right? Like, so the way we consume things has moved to monthly recurring subscription revenue. Nonprofit donations are the exact same way. So if I, gun to my head, what's the number? As of this, in 2024, 2025, it should be about a quarter, right, of your donors. If you have 1,000 donations, you should be at about 250 of those are recurring gifts. And if you're not there yet, there's tons of stuff you can do. I would start, I think I even have a slide. Why do we want recurring giving? Because they give more, because they're less likely to lapse. They set up the recurring gift, and they continue to make gifts to your organization at a higher rate than people who don't have a recurring gift set up. Everything in the world points towards starting your recurring giving program. But I'm not going to get way into details on this, but I do want to show it. This is from our webinar on the world's greatest donation page. And it's not really a donation page, it's a donation page funnel. What I'm showing here, and Rob can smile because he built and tested and perfected all of this for us across our clients over the last, 5 or 6 years. This is the map. If you are a nonprofit, this is your template for how you set up a donation page funnel, right? You start people by linking them to an appropriate recurring gift, different pages for different gift amounts. There is no longer a one-size-fits-all page. You funnel them towards a page that asks for a recurring gift. If they don't want to make a recurring gift, that's great. You give them the option to click to another page to make a one-time gift or to make a pledge. Okay. Then you have your special use, special purposes pages over here. Rob, if he hasn't already, I'm sure he can drop this link into chat. One of the most popular webinars we get pinged every time somebody goes back and views, and everybody, you can always tell when it's time to build donation pages because people go back and they grab this template and they're looking at it and they copy it. Yes, sorry, Andy, I'm moving on.
That's all right. I'm pretty sure, Nick, Giving USA, I believe, is who did that statement for us. And then the other thing I wanted to kind of point out here, it's one thing to offer recurring gifts. It's another thing to promote recurring gifts. The reason why you don't have a lot of recurring gifts is because you're not telling people that you have the ability to accept recurring gifts, that they should do it, whether you have a donor recognition society for your recurring givers or not. If you're not promoting it, they're not doing it. So be intentional about letting people know it's an option. And honestly, as an organization, it's your preferred option as to how you would like to receive gifts from them. That will make a difference.
And we have a webinar called How to Set Up the World's Greatest Recurring Giving Program. That would be the place to start as you look at this. So if you don't have 25% of your gifts, if you don't feel good about it, then go fix your donation pages. Thank you, Rob, for that link. And go watch our webinar on setting, free webinar, by the way, all of them. How to set up the world's greatest recurring giving program. Unbelievable, great advice. I can't remember if it was Sarah or Leslie or both.
Sarah, I believe.
Yeah, they did a great job. Okay. How many duplicates or deceased records should you have in your database, right? The answer is very technical and very nuanced. And the answer is you should have a lot fewer than you have right now. Okay. So whatever your number is, it should be lower. Okay. Andy, again, what would you say before I get into why? Like, give them a 5-second answer. What should you have for what percentage should be deceased?
I mean, in deceased, you're probably looking at anywhere between maybe 1 to 3 to 4%. I mean, people die, they typically don't call you after they die and say, hey, I'm dead, take me out of your database, right? So it does take some time. Blackbaud does have a tool called Deceased Finder that a lot of our organizations use that does kind of notify you or at least give you some sense of certainty of when that is, but it doesn't automatically kill them out of your system. You still have to do the work. It just helps you identify, who you might not be hearing from ever again. And dupes are the same way. I mean, duplicates will happen every day. We have organizations that go in weekly and clean out dupes, and guess what? The next week they have new dupes to clean out. Like, that's just the reality. If you're an active fundraising outfit, you're going to have new data coming in on donation forms. You've got multiple people entering stuff, and things happen. So you just got to, again, be intentional about cleaning it up. Put processes and procedures in place to check it. In some sort of cadence.
And here is the part why we love what we're doing and why all these webinars are so popular is because your life is a whole lot easier. So I'm going to take 3 minutes and praise Austin Brown. If you know Austin, she's an absolute genius.
She has a bobblehead, by the way.
Bobblehead Austin, which I have.
I do too. Behind you.
Stacy Cope, Lauren, Rob, they're unbelievable. They're so smart at this. Here is what you can do through automation. Okay. So this is, I just got to show you what they're doing, right? Because it is, if you attended BBCon, you saw some of this stuff. Let's talk about what automation can do for your deceased records. Okay. This is a record I'm looking at right now. Okay. What do you know? It's inside a Razor's Edge. Deceased automation cooked up by, I don't know if it's Stacy or Austin that built this one. All you need to do now. So think of all the steps that usually go into this. If you've been a long-time DBA, you know what's going on. They built an automation so that you mark something deceased, and then automatically all of the other painful things you need to do, the little steps you need to go through, happen on their own. This is, well, I'll show you visually what I'm talking about. It will go in, you just mark the person deceased, it then marks them inactive. It marks them as no valid address, which is really important. It inactivates all their phones and emails. It adds a solicit code so you can suppress them from future mailings. It's going to add an end date to constituent codes. What else is it going to do? It doesn't stop there, and there's more. It unchecks send mail on address. Again, the DBA, longtime DBAs, you know what's happening all through all this stuff. All these little things you have to do, or else you run into, kinks down the road. It adds an end date to the address. It ends any active solicitor assignments. All of these manual things you would have to do. This is where the world is going and why we're so bullish on automation. That's why we build Automate Genius. That's why we're helping clients, because we think it is insane for someone working in a database to have to go and make 12 changes when someone dies. That's madness. So we built automations to do it all for you. We're very excited. I want to show you what it can do. Client of ours, Nationwide Children's Hospital, they did deceased record finder. They had 14,000 deceased records. They did it manually for a while, and they tracked, and they were able to get through 732 records a month. It's going to take a long time to clean up those deceased records, which if you're in a healthcare foundation, you have a lot more deceased records, right? Like that's just kind of the nature of the business. With this automation, they were getting through 2,000 deceased records a month. So think how much cleaner your database is. Think how you could use your time more wisely. That is what automation can do. If you're in higher ed, or if you're at a high school, automations to help you keep stuff clean. Parent record. I didn't think this was a big deal, Andy. Do you remember this from BBCon? I was like,
I do.
I don't
We're
know
allowed
why.
to lose an Oz, like in like Arsenio Hall was in the back, doing one of these.
And I told Austin, I'm like, I don't know why we're promoting this. It doesn't seem that big of a deal to me. And like the people just went nuts for it. So parent records looks like this. You can go in and take the child's record. You can look at when they graduated, and they have a little automation. So when something happens, when they graduate, it goes in and updates the parent records. This is a huge deal for higher ed. This is how you can keep your stuff clean. So when we talk about benchmarking, it's one thing to know, hey, am I better or worse than other organizations? It's another thing to know, how do I get better? And a lot of it can be done through automation. And there's just really cool stuff out there. This might be the last one I'm highlighting. Phone cleanup. So they built an automation that does all of these 7 things. I want to highlight one thing here. Cleans up cell phones entered as home. So you can go through it, and that's important because a lot of organizations are running text to give appeals, right? Or you do ringless voicemails and things where it matters if you know if it's a cell phone. I think Austin built this automation that you go and it'll look up the phone number against a database of phone numbers by zip code. So if you're an organization in New Jersey, it goes and looks. And if people don't, if their phone number is from an out-of-state number, you can be very confident that it's a cell phone, right? So it goes in and cleans that stuff up automatically. It's crazy. Okay, sorry, last one here. Importing from outside sources. Many of you have, let's say you have Razor's Edge as your donor management system or whatever it might be, and then you have, an event software, you have a text to give software, you have some auction software, you have any number of things that are out there, and you have to bring data back and forth. That leads to a ton of dupes. It leads to undoing work that you'd already done. If you had records that you cleaned up and then you bring in a new set and you bring more bad data in. Through Automate Genius, they built this thing called a magic lookup folder. The way it works is you're going to drag that Excel file of data from the third party in. You're going to drop it in the magic lookup folder, which is sitting on SharePoint. And that automation is going to start to look for things. It's going to look for matches on email. It's going to look for matches on address. It's going to look for any phone matches. It's going to do all the smart things. It's going to look at names and everything else. And what it's then going to do is spit you out 3 new spreadsheets. So you started with one spreadsheet from a different source of information. You drag it into the magic folder. Magic folder goes and looks inside of Razor's Edge and gives you back 3 glorious Excel spreadsheets, which are then going to tell you, hey, here are the ones that are matches, and here's a constituent code match up to it. Here's the one that are not certain matches, but likely matches. You can go through and approve, and we add a constituent code. Here's the ones that are entirely brand new. You got to do a manual, right? Save yourself 2/3 of the time. This is where the world is going. So I just wanted to plug that. Again, if you're using Automate Genius, you already know all this stuff already. But as we talk about benchmarking and how do we get better, it is no longer just manual work to get stuff better. It is set up an automation to do this stuff while you sleep. Okay. All right. I'll hop off my soapbox there. Andy, while we answer questions. Sorry, you go ahead. Do we have any questions?
No, so there was one, I think Jennifer put in there, like, no, we're not suggesting that you delete deceased records from your system, but again, there is a process, which Nick just showed, that it might be 12 different steps. And if you only do 11 of those 12 steps, there's a chance that you're going to have an upset widow call in your office saying, hey, I told you, Harry was dead, and why are you still sending us mail? Those kinds of things, right? And so if I would say if they are deceased and they've never given, you're paying for record bandwidth and you're not going to get something from them. So that it's costing you money to keep them in there. But if they've given, if they have some sort of relationship, keep them in there. Just make sure that you're inactivating them, you're deceasing them appropriately, so that you're not continuing to send them stuff accidentally.
Yeah. So I put a poll up there. So the way that we don't have to bombard you about automated use, if you want to learn more about it, this is the way in. I mean, there's a wait list. Andrew Mankey takes all these initial meetings. He's the busiest guy on earth. If you do want to, if you haven't done it yet and you want to learn more about setting up automations, he's happy to talk to you. This is a way to get through to that. If you're already using it, just let us know you're already using it. That way we don't have to bug everybody about this. So while that runs, Andy, let's go through the Q&A. Let's talk through. I know a bunch of people have questions in there. I'm going to answer one first from Cameron, and it was back about the donation pages.
Okay.
It says, hey, I saw your funnel. Do you prefer that recurring giving page setup to the Blackbaud option that lets you toggle? We absolutely do. Now, Blackbaud's getting better with their donation forms. We credit them for that. But we have tested this across giant clients across many years. Your best option for getting a recurring donor is to start someone on a page where the only option is a recurring donor. Now, you cannot trick them. You should not do that. That's a terrible idea, and also it doesn't work. But send them to a page, invite them to make a recurring gift, and have a very clear, hey, if you want to make a one-time gift, click here and go to a separate page. Create 2 separate pages, separate forms. We have found on average, we can get about 20 to 25% of donors to sign up for a recurring gift with that strategy. Okay. So I recommend that. If it's just a toggle, there's not as much oomph, right? Like you want to really land them on that page. So I just want to make sure I got to that. Andy, what did you want to tackle?
I got a couple here. One of the questions from Melanie is, do the lapse and at-risk donors take soft credits into account? Largely, it's based on how you have your system configured, whether how are you recognizing soft credits? Are you recognizing soft credits? We have some organizations that have, 1 record per household, some that have, each spouse has their own record, right? So there is a little bit of fuzz around, some of those numbers and what that might look like. So it is hard to answer because it truly is unique to each and every organization. And I would encourage you to kind of look at some of your business rules as to how you might have that set up. Another question real quick is the data health scorecard. Can you take into consideration only donors who are active and not deceased? I can tell you that when you're looking at the data health scorecard, it's only looking at active records. It's not looking at deceased, deceased records. You're generally taking those. A lot of organizations will eliminate those addresses just as one additional step to make sure they're not doing that. So when you're looking at percentage of emails, percentage of phone numbers, those kinds of things, it's really focused on your active donor base, your active, database, not, people who are deceased or, lost or, those kinds of things.
Question. So it always comes up, and I hate it that I never really answer to it. So like, is phone cleanup available in Canada? Like, I don't know the answer. There's always wrinkles there. Austin seems to have a better beat on that too, so we can ask her. I don't know the answer to that, Carol. I'm sorry. Our friend Bridget asked, hey, what is the best way to update correct email addresses? A couple things. We love Email Hippo. Okay. So if you have emails right now, there's a service called Email Hippo. It's cheap, it's affordable. You take your list, you upload it, it sends a ping to those email addresses, and it comes back and it says, these ones we can guarantee are good, these ones we can guarantee are bad, and then there's some in the middle. That will let you take out the bad ones so that you don't get dinged for emailing to a bunch of dead email addresses. So you should be running Email Hippo maybe once a year, more if you're constantly bringing in email addresses. So that's number one. Use Email Hippo. It's great. No affiliation. We just love to plug good products, give credit where it's due. The other thing to update and correct, do not buy Email Finder. Okay. I could not be more emphatic on this. Do not buy lists. There's very rare situations where that's helpful. When you buy lists, whether it's from Blackbaud or anybody else, you get crap. You get a whole lot of Nick works at GM, and you get like a sales@gm.com type address. Like, it is not helpful. You're going to fill your database with junk, and it's going to take you a long time to get rid of it. I have yet to meet someone who's done that, who's purchased a list that is happy with it, right? Do not do that unless you're really into the acquisition game and you know what you're doing. What you should do is look at everything you're already doing and think, is there a way that I could drive people to fill out a form right now? Like, can I get them to fill out a survey? Can I invite them to, if you're in a faith-based organization, share a prayer intention? Can I ask people about their birthdays? So they send them a little surprise or something like that? Is my donation form asking for email addresses? Are all of my events that we're doing ask for email addresses? That is the way to get addresses. Do not try and acquire them from a third party. Just look at what you're doing and change your process so everything is feeding into your system. And then probably use automation to bring that data in, right? If you're having to go through another third party. Okay. Andy, was there other one? So that was Bridget's phone cleanup. I answered. Did you answer the one? We had a couple about software. So way back when we were talking about benchmarking and the KPIs and stuff.
Yep.
Does it take into account soft credits? I have no idea.
And again, I think it's the way that it works is it's unique to each organization in terms of how you have some of those things set up.
Okay.
Greg, this is one of the things Greg had put on there. Could you explain deceased health? Mine is average. Does that mean that I have some donors that are deceased, but I haven't marked them as such? Yes, it does. The problem is Blackbaud has a pretty good sense of who those people are, and they kind of keep that behind a paywall. So they're looking at your database saying, hey, we know that there are people in your database that are likely deceased. And if you have Deceased Finder, or if you purchase Deceased Finder, they will disclose who those people are. If not, you're just going to know that you're in there. But again, if you're looking at an average, you're probably looking at 1 to 3% of your database might be deceased. So depending upon the size of your database, it's probably a relatively small number. I can go ahead and tell you that if you have anybody that's 120 years old in your database, there's a good chance that they're deceased, and you should probably stop mailing them at this point.
Love it. Hey, let's do one last question. I want to do it because a couple of people asked. Can you talk briefly, Andy, about Address Updater and Address Finder quickly? We recommend those, right? And what
We do. Yep. So
Okay.
an Address Accelerator is a cool tool that does allow you to, as you're entering new addresses in there, it kind of auto-populates some of those things for you. Address Updater, or kind of Address Finder generally will run quarterly for you. Most of our clients have switched and are now doing it through the web view as opposed to the database view. The database view is great. It allows you to have to do a few more steps. The NXT or the web view version of it is a little bit more automated, but you do, if you're kind of move into it for the first time, you do have to kind of set up some controls, because if you want to still see things before it just kind of automatically changes for you, or you have to tell it basically what you want to do with the old address, if you want to override it, you want to move it to former address, those kinds of things. Yeah, you have some things to decide, but I'm a proponent of using WebView for Address Updater.